So, welcome back, everyone, to Surviving and Thriving the Black Experience. I am still here with Megan. And so, last off, we were talking about the importance of trusting your child. Um, I will say that that is so true. It is so undeniably true because a lot of the times we are our children's first and last. What's the word I'm looking for? Our children have to trust us. We're
Mhm.
the only advocates that they in fact have. So we're the first responders and the last responders to anything that goes wrong in their life.
Right.
And a lot of the times, because I have experience working with early childhood, and I'm just here to speak truth, truth to power with this situation. People need to really take heed to their children. And what I mean by that is I will say this unapologetically. Children are safe within educational institutions, child care facilities, and things as such, as long as the teacher is able to, in fact, have a dopamine hit. Let me
Mm.
explain what I mean by that. As long as little Tommy is coming to school and he is the ideal sunshine, that
Mhm.
child is safe within that environment, that child's needs are met, and things as such. As soon as Tommy has a reoccurring rough day,
Mm.
that dopamine hit for that teacher is no longer there.
Mm.
And so what that means, that does not mean that, oh, this means that a teacher should and or is able to behave in any type of way because they're not receiving that dopamine hit anymore from that child metaphorically, right?
Mhm.
But when little Tommy goes home and says, Mommy, my teacher was not nice to me today, do
Mm.
not shrug that off. Do not sit here and just say, oh, okay, that's just a kid just saying something. Be inquisitive. Ask your child, what do you mean? What feelings happen? How do you know that Mrs. Purple, yellow, brown was being mean? Ask these questions. So I'm so happy that you, in fact, talked about the importance of trust.
Mhm.
Did you want to add on more in regards to that, Megan?
No, I think that you really kind of captured that feeling on that. I was actually thinking about this idea of representation as it relates to um as a Black mother, right? The representation that I am for my children and
Mm-hmm.
what then they think about in terms of what it means to be a mother, what does it mean to be a woman, right? What does it mean to be a Black woman? Um, so it's kind of interesting that this whole idea of representation extends, yes, within the professional workspace, but then also at home. And I think as Black women, there are a lot of times
Mm-hmm.
where we wear a lot of hats,
Mm-hmm.
right? And what are the hats and who are you representing in which space? So I think it's always, again, kind of tying back to the theme around authenticity. How do you bring yourself in full and show up full and whole?
Mm-hmm.
It's important to show. I think this relates to this idea of when, let's say, Miss Purple, Miss Brown, Miss Yellow doesn't get that dopamine hit, and they're not because that day maybe they're not wearing that hat of I'm the perfect teacher, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And how do you give yourself maybe and extend yourself the grace um, in how you react to that as a
Yes.
teacher in that situation,
Mm-hmm.
from the parent perspective of listening to your child and being like, well, um, how did that make you feel? right? And then being able to have that conversation about, well, you know what? Sometimes folks are going to, sometimes folks are not always on. And what does it mean to not always be on, you know?
Hmm. Absolutely. I think about I haven't touched base on this, and I didn't even touch base on it in regards to my actual presentation I made today, which will be out next week sometime. But what about the like burden of representation that are on the actual children? They don't
Mm,
even know how to name it yet, and
hmm
like what this pressure is that they're in fact feeling,
hmm
and or the comparison that our children in fact have to in fact I'm gonna say deal and also suffer with, even
hmm
within seeing a child within the same race within a classroom.
hmm
I was really have sat here and heard, I'm gonna make up names, but I've heard a teacher literally make the comment of saying, like, how come you can't be like Tim? Or why aren't you doing what Tim is doing? You see Tim is doing this. Why can't you do that? Not even understanding the capacity of that particular child.
hmm
And it's just, it's really sad and disheartening to see that, like you said, like in 2025, these things are still happening. And
hmm
even our little precious babies who don't even understand what this pressure is. Think about it, as us as adults, we're experiencing this like left and right, and we have to sit here and learn how to keep a straight face
hmm
while our brain and our synapses are triggered. And these stimuli is creating this anxiety, right? But our babies don't understand it. And we wonder why our babies start having behavioral problems, being either too social. I'm sorry, let me make sure I say it correctly, being too talkative and or
hmm
being in fact isolated. And we wonder why they can't find the balance in certain spaces. So I think that's also something as well too. So can you tell me, do you think there's a difference between carrying the torch for our community and carrying the carrying the burden for it? Do you think there's a difference between the two?
Ooh, so I think that because I think that's one of the things. So a lot of my background is within like a Black feminist tradition, and I think what I've learned from my foremothers within a Black feminist tradition is there everything is in a binary, right? It doesn't have to be like an either or kind of thing. So I think with this, it's a both and because it's both sides of a coin.
Okay.
Right. I think that there is beauty in carrying in like the ancestral or this like communal wisdom and responsibility, right? This
Mm-hmm.
collective responsibility. I
Mm-hmm.
think that collective responsibility, though, can sometimes create spaces where we aren't presented with the opportunity to be individuals or to just be,
Okay.
right? Or to just exist. So I do think that it's a both and. Um, and I think I sit in an interesting, as a millennial, I feel like I sit in an interesting, like in between generational thing. So I look back at my mom's generation. My mom was born in 1954, right? Um, and she definitely kind of had this the idea that, well, baby, you are carrying this torch. It is why she decided to go into the profession that she did. My mom was an
Mm-hmm.
educator. My grandmother was an educator, right? So it was this on, passing on knowledge, passing on wisdom. But there are also ways that I remember talking to my mom and her saying that the first thing she wanted to do, she actually wanted to be a psychologist
Mm-hmm.
because she was really interested in how people thought, but she also wanted to write poetry. So I think she ended up being like both a psychology and like an English education major. But when it
Mm-hmm.
came down to it, and they were like, "Well, you got to get a job now," like, and we don't really know any Black psychologists, and poets don't make money. So what you gonna do? Be an English teacher, right? And so it's kind of that's the both and of
Mm-hmm.
you want to carry, there is a collective responsibility, right? 'Cause
Mm-hmm.
she was taught, well, you have a certain skill set and you should share that skill set with your community.
Mm-hmm.
And it might be selfish of you not to, but she did have to make the choice of giving up
Mm-hmm.
maybe certain passions that she had, maybe like creative passions that she had, or the opportunity to maybe just try something like psychology just because,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, So I think if anything, that's sometimes the negative aspect of carrying, carrying the torch and collective responsibility. I think there has to be this balance between what I call like the self-care and like communal care, right? How do I, yes, make sure that I am one day going to be a good ancestor? Like I want folks to venerate me because I contributed, right, in this good
Correct.
way to communal well-being. But I also don't want to look back and feel like I gave up every part of myself.
Hmm.
Um, and that the sacrifice was just my own well-being, right?
Hmm.
Just for the sake of like communal harmony. So a good balance of things,
Hmm.
which I think we're always trying to find.
I love that. First of all, I love the both and because I just know when as this series is gonna keep on going and as I'm making other series, I'm using that. So I just want to I will put coined by Megan L. Green if that's what you need. But
This is not even coined by me. That's how knowledge works, right?
okay. So
Because it's somebody else that came from someone else's brilliant mind and it
yes.
now flows.
Yeah, like it definitely does. Because I was like, there's some things that actually are both.
Mhm,
Like that it doesn't have to be one extreme or the other. It could actually
mhm,
be a middle ground, and that absolutely makes sense. Um, when I was thinking this question, as I like had said it to you, I was thinking about like when I was in class and how I was talking about I'll let the world know a little bit about myself. Like I had the burden of understanding that I didn't have a choice but to succeed.
mm,
Like I didn't have a choice but to sit here and make sure that I was going to succeed because my father was incarcerated and I was being raised by a single mother. And so I had no choice. And all I saw was commercials. And I put this in my final presentation for school. I was like, all I saw was that I was gonna be on drugs and that I was gonna be a baby mama and I was never gonna go to college. And then I was gonna have 1,000 children. Like that's all I saw in regards to a representation of a young Black woman who was in fact who came from a single mom.
mhm,
But they don't never talk about like the support of the grandparent. They don't talk about the support of a mom who chooses she lets go of herself to sit here and make sure that you're okay.
mhm,
My mom in particular uprooted her whole entire life out of Chicago for us to move to a suburb for me to have a different life from what she had. And it took a lot. She lost friends. She had to learn how to do different jobs and things and such to make sure that I could have the opportunity to be where I'm at today. So she
mhm,
had to sacrifice so much. I think about in regards to the word of carrying a burden, I want to dismantle the burden part of it because I recently can't get teary out of here, but like I recently had to go through navigating a space of selling my grandmother's home.
mm,
And with that being said, I had to learn the ins and out of how, in this twisted system, they can use a person of color to call you and say that that is the buyer of the home for it to be another person who's actually purchasing the home.
wow,
They can make it in regards to where um, it's just a lot of games that can be played in people's face. And so let me talk about like the burden or the dismantling the word burden. My grandmother owned that home, and that was her first home that she bought. And I was talking to my significant other as I was cleaning out the house because my grandmother was a hoarder. And long story short, ignorantly is what I will say. I was like, why would this woman keep all this stuff? Like, not the nasty hoarders that you be seeing that's like got
right.
rats and everything all over. They got cats in the no, not that. She's a very clean hoarder, but just had
Right.
a lot of stuff.
Mhm,
And I did not realize why my grandmother had so much material. So I'll stay there so I don't get emotional about it.
mm,
I had to sit here and have a deep conversation with my boyfriend in regards to why my grandmother potentially had all those items. And she also had told me as well, but it never resonated, unfortunately, until she passed, which was some years ago, but it didn't hit until I actually was having to go through selling this home.
mm,
My grandmother had a lot of these materials because back in the day, of course, with segregation and things as such, you couldn't go into certain shops. So
mhm,
that is the reason why we had to learn specific skills in regards to making our own items. This is why we, in fact, there are so many hoarders that people just don't understand people's stories. in regards to why they have so many things, because you have to think about a concept of having to live without. And a lot of us are blessed to not have to do that. And so it carrying the torch for me is having the legacy of my family line, that my grandmother's sacrifices, my mom's sacrifice were not in vain. And so that's what I think of that aspect. And so I say both and to that as well. Whew, I did it. I ain't shed no tear. um, Tell me, so in regards to all the material and stuff that I've been seeing and this enlightening and wonderful conversation that we've been having as well, what are some further topics that you'd like to see me, in fact, go over, invest some time in, and share some light to?
So I just finished reading this book. It's a new fiction book by Sibo Campbell. And so it's called A Sky Full of Elephants. And the themes within that book were just, listen, it was fabulous for me. But I think the biggest thing that I walked away with was this idea of tapping into like a Black collective consciousness and using that as like fuel or energy. And so there was a particular part of your intro, one of your intro videos, where you were kind of talking about the purpose behind the series and what healing looks like, and that healing is connection.
Mhm,
And it made me think of the theme of this book, right? Of how literally uh, Black folks within the United States of America, in this fictional setting, right,
mhm,
were able to take um, the energy, this collective energy, as we're talking about carrying the torch, right? And the
mhm,
burden of what it is to kind of carry other people's dreams and aspirations and hopes with you,
mhm,
right? Um, but if you could take that and make that tangible and make that energy that literally the world is running off of, right?
mhm,
And so I think this idea of what does it mean to tap into our historical memories,
mhm,
um, but then as we think about how history has impacted where we are now, especially because a lot of our conversation has really been around like our children and, what does it mean in terms of parenting and mothering and the traditions we pass down, um, really thinking about what are our dreams and what do we want like future aspirations to look like, right?
mhm,
Like how are we designing? We are talking about the present and how the past has impacted what our present experiences are as Black
mhm,
professionals. But I'm really interested to think about what is the future going to look like, right? By the time my sons who are 13 and 15 enter the workplace, are they still going to have to shoulder some of the same things that we're talking around like the burden of representation, and what it means to be the only one, right? Um, what do we imagine the world being like, let's say 15, 20 years from now for our children, right? And then what can we do right now today to kind of push that reality and make that reality, um, more than that, because that was kind of what was happening within the book. It was written, yes, from a fictional perspective, but I think there's some very, it was still rooted in our like ancestral wisdom
mhm,
around there are ways in which our ancestors did literally do that way before somebody like, let's say, Tesla, right, did some of these inventions way before um other folks kind of took energy that you can't see and made it real. think that we're in a place, especially right now, because I look at my my Gen Z folks around me, I look at my children and their generation, and I think that there are so many ways in which they are world building, and they are taking things that we can't see and making them real.
Mhm. I think, so first of all, yes, all those things I wrote down. I will definitely have to go ahead and read and purchase this book, and I will also put this in the description for the
Mhm,
audience who would in fact like to read this because we need to stay up on that. Um, it, I think that this is so. It's not a fact, but it's just my thought. I feel like this new generation is unapologetic.
mhm,
I think they understand the importance of reclaiming their power. I think they understand the importance of resistance.
mhm,
And I think they are unapologetic in regards to what their needs are.
mhm,
So I, contrary to what you hear like in social media, that's like, oh my God, the new generation is just going to be gone and that's just going to be that. I don't think that's what it is.
mhm,
Um, I can think of different things that, like, as I grew up, of this concept of, with good jobs, keep your head down,
mhm, mhm,
be seen, not heard. Um, don't leave that job, that's a good job, you don't want to let go of no good job, no matter how you're being treated in different spaces and things as such. But I think this next generation ain't gonna play these games. I don't think I mean, when they say the world is your oyster, I honestly think that this next generation is going to take heed directly to that. I
mhm,
mean, I think about like the introduction, I don't know exactly what year it came out. I know I just started using it now, but the concept of this AI thing, right?
right,
I think about like how literally businesses are at your fingertips. Ideas are at your fingertips. You can't, I mean, I think of the days of a thesaurus and a dictionary.
right,
Like I'm from that generation.
yeah,
That's all I really had. And maybe Ask Jeeves. I think that's what
right,
I used to have. But I think that like this, I feel like this next generation is gonna be okay as long as they don't be silent. As long as they in fact keep pushing and keep saying and don't be silenced,
yeah,
they will be fine. I think as long as they don't fall for the metaphorical pacifying,
mhm,
as long as they don't in fact fall for deception, tricks, trickery, and things as such, they're gonna
mhm,
be okay. That's what I think. I also want to show a book. I'm hoping I can see it from back here. So I want to talk about this really quick. I had also at that same conference,
mhm,
and Megan knows Megan, of course. So also at that same conference, I was able to meet one of the authors of this book, Our Skin. And I want to talk about this really quick because it's in regards to representation.
mhm,
Um, This particular book hit hard for me because even as an adult, when I read it, I said, "Ooh," and I said, I'm authentic, I'm true, right? I said, "Ooh," not from like some stuff I didn't know, but still
mm,
realizing that like, oh, we here now.
mhm,
We here now about telling the truth, so we
yeah,
not lying no more. Okay,
right,
and I can see why that has people shiver me timbers.
right,
I can understand why that has people shaking in their boots.
mhm,
I mean, if I'm correct, I wish I should have wrote down the person's name, but if I'm correct in regards to the political world, let's say that, I remember the conversation of, I don't know if that was a governor, a congressperson, or whomever it was, who
mhm,
was so upset
mhm,
in regards to how he felt this book represented him as a whole. Well, maybe you should just take a look in the mirror. It's that simple. It's that
right,
simple. Why? I'm gonna do it this way, and then I'm gonna leave it alone. A hit dog gonna holler, and,
right,
and that's
yeah,
what I got. So for me, when I saw this book and when I read this book and when I decided to sit here and put this within different spaces that I was allowed to put in within these spaces,
mhm,
It was absolutely amazing in regards to the illustrations. It was absolutely amazing in regards to how it was put out for it to be developmentally appropriate for children
Mhm.
and to invoke conversation. Because I honestly think that's all this book was meant to do.
Mhm.
Invoke a conversation. It literally said a first conversation about race.
Right.
Like it literally does exactly what it's supposed to do. But I think a lot of the times adults are not ready for those conversations.
Yeah.
Adults are not ready to stop saying, I don't see color. Everybody's the rainbow. I think that we're still in that space. Even though we have implicit bias trainings, right? Even though we have culturally sustaining practices, trainings and models and things of such, I think it's really hard for people to come out of themselves. I
Mhm.
think it's really hard for people to say, hey, I'm not blaming you for what someone else did, but please acknowledge that this happened.
Mhm.
And or please acknowledge that my child is brown. My child is black. My
Mhm.
child is not, I don't know, whatever color, a tree to not have to say the child's race. Like,
Right.
like those things we just have to dismantle. And that is what I am here for. And so
Mhm.
that's what I will continue to, in fact, do every single time.
Mhm. Mhm.
But Megan, did you have anything else that you wanted to add to the conversation? Did you have anything that you wanted to say with this book? And by the way, everyone, this book is called Our Skin. It's called, it's called Our Skin, a first conversation about race. So this is
Yes.
what it looks like.
So lifting up for sure, bringing into the room because as torchbearers, I think that that is also a. Sometimes when we think about representation, we kind of go up,
Mhm,
right? Or we feel like it has to be like our elders, but I think a lot of times, sometimes it's our peers that we
mhm,
also are carrying into the space. So I want to lift up the brilliant Dr. Megan Pamela Ruth Madison, author
mhm,
of all the books in the First Conversation series, but I think you hit the nail on the head in the idea that sometimes our representation causes other people discomfort, right?
mhm,
Um, and getting beyond this idea of wanting to shy away from other people's discomfort, and so I think that's the lesson for me and why it was important to expose graduate students, right, and a whole master's program to this text. And yes, from the perspective of this could be a tool in your early childhood classroom, but also this could be a tool for you as an individual, right?
mhm,
To kind of really sit with your own racial identity development and where you are as an adult with that. But it's also meant to be, right, a fantastic tool for how you would have that conversation with young children. But this idea of creating the space where showing up whole and showing up full is not just like an optional thing,
mhm,
right, for folks, but it's really just the norm. And so
mhm,
setting that as the bar, that when you come into this space, right, you can show up full, you can show up whole. I think that we only get there by doing what you said, Candace, which was really sitting in that discomfort.
mhm,
So getting out of our own way,
mhm.
right? And really reflecting on what does it mean um, for me to delve into this.
Well, I appreciate you so much, Megan. I'm so excited we did
Mm. Yes.
it. I'm so excited. So I want to close out by saying, Megan, thank you so, so much. You are not only for your brilliance today, but for the impact you've made in your own life as well as an educator and in my life as a guide. Your presence in this conversation and in the classroom reminds me that teaching is more than just a profession. It's an art, a calling, and a reflection of our deepest values. As a Black queer woman, you model what it means to live fully, teach boldly, and lead with integrity. It's been a true gift to have you here. I thank you for sharing your voice, your truth, both and
Yeah.
your unwavering commitment to shaping futures through education and expression. You reminded us once again that survival is not just the beginning. We are
Mm.
here to thrive. So from surviving and thriving the Black experience, I love that. Clock that.
Yeah.
Everyone have a great night. Thank you so much and stay tuned.